My name is Daniel. I'm super excited to be here. In fact, I'm not going to front. This is my first time on stage since my bar mitzvah. Mazel tov to you. Between when this photo was taken and now, I became a UX designer through a very roundabout way. And so if anybody throughout this conference is interested in sharing career stories or bar mitzvah stories, please come and say hi. Today I'm going to talk about anti-design, by which I mean brutalism or other design trends that take a sort of combative approach to design as we know it, and often put out designs that look unpolished or even jacked up, much like the slides in this deck. And I'm going to explore the challenge that I think anti-design poses to design as we know it and how we understand humans and the human experience. I want to start off with this tweet that I came across a few months ago. Show of hands, has anybody seen this? Okay, so definitely a good number of people. And we're in a safe space, and so I want to admit that, I've never seen a tweet a design tweet that resonated with me so deeply. I know in my own work that there are times when I start designing something, and it starts to look very similar to something I've designed before, or very similar to something that somebody else has designed, maybe people in this audience, to be honest. And so it was cathartic for me to see thousands of other designers retweet this. And I think that there's been this sort of sentiment out there that design is getting boring, or design is getting stale or cookie cutter. And I think that this has been a sentiment that's been percolating the last few years. And so I want to sort of look at why is that happening? And I'm going to go through three potential reasons. I'm going to reject the first two, and I think anti-design adopts the third reason, and I'm going to explore that. So the first reason I think that is often put out there is the ubiquity of patterns. Things like material design, or bootstrap, or Squarespace templates, or things like that. Some point to this as the reason why some design might be getting boring or stale. I don't think this is the reason, because you can create lots of different things with material design or with the patterns that we have at our disposal. And so I reject this as the sort of underlying thing. I think that this is more a symptom of staleness in design rather than a cause. The second reason I think that's put out there, and this is the official AIGA marketing funnel, in case anybody wants to use that. The second reason that I think people offer for why design sometimes feels stale is the need to drive business and conversion. We know what works, and we can't get away from that because of this imperative to sell or to get signups or followers or whatever it may be. I also think that this argument only goes so far because, from personal experience, anecdotally, when I go to sites that I think are considered part of anti-design and that trend, I find myself engaging even more. I'm not bouncing away from the site. I'm sort of enraptured and sort of drawn in to play around with it. And the fact that even though these sites, I think, are complex, disorienting in some way, I think that they can actually drive conversion, and some of the examples I'll show, I think, are doing just that. So the third reason that I think we might be seeing some staleness in design that is out there is simplicity. And I think that this is the reason that anti-design adopts, and this is the challenge. I think that it's fair to say that, and I'll speak from my own work, that simplicity is sort of this Uber principle in design. If something is not simple, we're not doing it right. If a user flow is too complex, we need to go back and do it again. If you're making somebody think too much, then you need to not do that and really come up with something that is much more simple. And I think that there's something really curious about this when it comes to human-centered design. So I think, as designers, and particularly as UX designers, we're often told to empathize with our users, and that there is no user, I think is said before, but that there are humans, and it's our job to go out and understand them in whatever context they happen to be in. So we have that on the one hand, but on the other hand, it seems to be the case that for every human and for every user in every situation, simplicity is something that is valued. And whether we call it frictionless, whether we call it fast, intuitive, easy, I think that simplicity becomes this sort of assumption about what we always want and what every human wants in every experience, everywhere. And I think what anti-design is saying is to challenge that assumption. And I'll use a couple different examples. I apologize if anybody in the audience has actually said this. Please come find me. I will update the slide and attribute it accordingly. But if we think about the best experiences or the most memorable experiences that you've had in your life, a first date, a festival or a concert, a game, a vacation, I don't think that what is memorable about any of those things is its simplicity. I think that when we think about what really makes us value those experiences, it's things that are maybe contrary to simplicity and certainly different. And I think that a couple things that we see and we value might be things like disorientation or complexity or mystery. These things definitely, I think, run counter to simplicity. And I want to show just a few examples of what I consider anti-design. This is from Bloomberg for one of the events that they had. And I raised before that business needs might be one reason why some design that we see is stale or boring or cookie cutter. I think this is a great example of something that is totally decadent, not simple at all, but something that is also trying to drive conversion, right? Trying to get people to sign up for this event. But you see, I think, some of the hallmarks of anti-design here. Uncertain hierarchy, skewed proportions, asymmetry, some whimsical aspects. These, I think, are hallmarks. Another example, this is a editorial site called Wrong Wrong, which I think is connected to a museum in Portugal. I think we're seeing a lot of anti-design in editorial spaces. I think that's one place. Bloomberg, again, another example. Outline magazine, which launched this year or last year, I think is another great example of bringing in these elements of disorientation and complexity. This is an example from the New Museum in New York. I think navigation is another place where there's opportunity to offer different experiences. This is anything but simple when it comes to a navigation path, trying to click down multiple levels rather than just the simple, hover for a drop down. I thought it was interesting. And then finally, this example from a musician with all of these elements coming at you, totally decadent and unnecessary, but I think interesting and a great experience for the same reason. Now, I want to bring it back to reality a little bit. I don't think what anti-design is trying to do is completely denigrate simplicity, or I don't think a viable theory of anti-design can completely ignore simplicity. Simplicity is essential, and we need it, and it's hard to do, and we as designers try to do that in complex situations like dealing with the IRS or in financial institutions or other places. So I think that what anti-design is saying is simplicity is not bad, but it's not the only value in design, and that there are other things, again, mystery, complexity, disorientation, and so on, that are there and deserve a place right next to simplicity, depending on the context and who we're designing for. So I want to close with a couple questions, which I don't have settled answers to at all, but have started to think about it. When and where is anti-design the right approach? I mentioned editorial contexts. I think you often see it working. Other examples might be arts organizations or institutions. But I think that there could be more, and I think that we're starting to see more. I remember seeing an e-commerce site that started to adopt some of these patterns, which one would think might be counter to business goals. But again, I think that there's an engagement opportunity with some of this. And the second question is, how do we make the case for design that prioritizes values other than simplicity? And I think that this is really a difficult thing to do. Not every client is going to be a Bloomberg or an Outline or a Whitney Museum, and it's often very difficult to get clients to want to take chances, especially on a design trend that is seemingly so counter to everything that we know as good design. And so I think it's looking for opportunities, looking for clients who might be willing to do something more bold than not. But I think that there are other questions or opportunities out there to try this out. And that's it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Keith. I teach at Northern Michigan University in Marquette. So I'm asking from an education standpoint, how do we teach students to get these sort of good patterns down while still getting them to innovate? What do you think the best way to approach that is? Because, it's like you can't break the rules until you know them kind of idea.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I'll speak as somebody who does not have a traditional design background. I came to UX, as I said, through a very roundabout way, got into the agency world, and then started teaching myself. And so I often have serious FOMO about not having that traditional design background. And I think that, like you said, I think the patterns are crucial as a sort of foundation. And once you know the rules, sort of like with grammar in English, once you know the rules, then it's fun to sort of break them and look for the places to break them. I don't think, maybe it's not that one has to come before the other. Maybe, these types of design methodologies should be taught, in the first year next to more traditional design approaches. But I think both are essential to learn.
Hi, my name's Liz Hickson, and I'm from Lawrence, Kansas. And my question kind of revolves around how you balance anti-design with kind of the principles like Steve Krug's "Don't Make Me Think," those kinds of things. Like, how do you balance that in terms of like self-evident and that kind of thing? Yeah,
I mean, I think it's looking for the right context to do it. I think, I come back to these editorial contexts where I think that anti-design is a potentially great way to go. There's not always a need when you go to a news site to immediately be hit over the head with a Dewey Decimal System navigation pattern that's going to get you, 5 levels deep into what you need to know. I think that there's more an opportunity for curation in an editorial space, and I think that is where something like this is useful because, as a designer and as an editorial curator, you're taking somebody by the hand and showing them what's important. And you're not, as I think in the Steve Krug example, relying so much on the user to do things themselves. So I think that it's looking for opportunities that have a more curatorial bent on them, where you're sort of bringing somebody into an experience.
Hi, I'm Janet, and I work for a large financial institution. And I think that part of the problem that we've had about keeping that freshness, like we did some things at the very beginning that now so many people are parroting, not that they're doing it because we did it, just because of modularity, ease of being able to build things, and having things need to go in so many form factors, so being responsive. And I'm just wondering, how can we do some anti-design when there's so many requirements for people to be using?
I think it's an incredible question, and it brings, it very much sort of exposes what I think might be some of the limitations of anti-design. I think that it's hard to do this type of design at scale because it seems like every screen or every template is almost, could be a work of art unto itself. And so the limitations are real, and anti-design might not be the right approach for every space or every brand. That being said, I think that even a large financial institution probably has experiences that are sort of bucketed or siloed, unto themselves, and it might provide an interesting playground to try that out. Thinking about, let's say, a rewards program and the digital experiences that go hand in hand with that. I think that could be compelling because of how branded something that takes on an anti-design flavor could feel.
Hi, my name is Linda. I work in New York at a law firm, so definitely not going to happen. But mine's more like a comment, really, and I feel like this is new to some people, but other people have seen this in the 90s with like David Carson in print and editorial.
Sure.
And I feel like now it's sort of migrating or might feel new to people, but I don't know, to me it's kind of like, oh, the 90s again on a screen.
Yeah.
But, that's just me, and it's just sort of this, of course people get their ideas from different places, and I don't know, do you find like there's like an age where some people gravitate towards this, and then like, I don't know, there's like demographics or like,
Yeah.
Younger people love this, and other people are like, this is annoying.
Yeah. No, it could be. It's a great question. I think that there is a nostalgia, 90s nostalgia element to some of these sites for sure. And so I think that people, designers who build these sites understand that and are maybe trying to reach an audience for that reason. I think that there could very much be a demographic and age element to this. I don't know that my parents would enjoy, any of these sites or examples that I showed, but I also I haven't tested that, and I don't know. And I think that it really, again, depends on the context. I think, if my point, or what I think the point anti-design is making is that we don't want simplicity always. We want to be challenged. We want complexity. I think that is a point that could spread across many ages and many demographics, depending on what it is we're trying to design.
Hi there, Archie from Orange County, California. If the anti-design aesthetic becomes a trend, is it still anti-design?
Ooh, good one. So I think that's a really good one. And I didn't explore, the sort of all the philosophy in this through this talk, and I haven't figured it out on my own yet. I sort of think that my personal view is anti-design, I think, will always have some anti-hegemonic flavor to it. And so it can never be, I think, if something that is now an anti-design pattern becomes, traditional or what we consider good design, I think anti-design, will churn away from that and sort of come up with something that is anti-hegemonic and outside the mainstream. But it's interesting because I do think some of the patterns that we're starting to see now that I would consider anti-design are starting to crop up more and more. One of the examples, the Wrong magazine that I showed, the navigation sits directly on the content below it, and so it sort of interferes with it. And I think I'm starting to see that as a pattern more and more. I know there are Squarespace templates that adopt that, so starting to see some of that. And will it remain anti-design? I think it's a good philosophical question.
Hi, I'm Mo I'm a lead designer at Oath, and my question is, how would you go about persuading a client that anti-design is right for them? Because when you say complexity, disorientation, the client is going to be like, why would I want to do that
right.
to the users?
Yeah, tough sell, right? Let's disorient your audience and see how they feel. Yeah, I think it's a challenge. Personally speaking, I'm just starting to get excited by this and dabble in it, and so I haven't personally had the conversation with a client and found yes, this is the opportunity that you should take. I think maybe a couple selling points might be the following. One, it's a trend, and depending on the client, certain clients care about more than others. Two, I think it's definitely a way to make your brand stand out, and that's always hugely important. I think, it depends. There's a question about what it actually communicates about your brand. I read an article the other day saying, anti-design from a branding perspective basically means I don't give a shit. And there's certain organizations that is a good and powerful message to have. But I think there's others that it's probably not right for. But that'll be I think the second reason is from a branding perspective. I think those would be my two main reasons that I would start. And then the third would be showing examples and, look at all this amazing design that's out there and trying to get them excited about it.
All right. Let's give Daniel a round of applause. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you all.
Awesome. Awesome stuff.